I have only once in a feminist book seen the idea of fragments of knowledge actively extolled. So I had a moment of aporia in the antique sense of disorientation concerning choosing my point of departure in this talk about the rivalry between media and education because it's such a complex subject. And people want to be attenuated to a holistic critique that returns to a point of departure that seems to appeal to their sense of understanding. Even though a lot of the people who fall for Jordan Peterson, for example, are bumper sticker heads, it behooves them to have their bumper stickers vivified by a holistic critique. But I'm not sure my aporia is justified because, after all, if I touch on an important issue, it would be possible to rewind and focus on it later. Also, might be possible for the Truman Show licky chops genocide pornographers from Carnegie Mellon and they put on the Truman Show investigation and a lifelong invasion of challenge of the right to exist object listening. They might be more forthcoming about some of these issues as they have them in their rewind files. As we know, there's quite a collection going on with Brett Leonard and Register. So, if there's a holistic problem involved in this that I'm addressing, it would be how do we rescue our minds from uh, extreme military religion who have actively set up a situation of making our planet, threatening to make our planet a demonstration model in their belief that the planet is, to put it as one joker did, a disposable planet. In other words, our souls are so important that the planet is disposable in pursuit of their salvation. Now, I believe that the mind and soul have a lot to interconnectedness with the way we treat the planet and each other. But there's a poem by Langston Hughes called Who But the Lord. I looked and saw that man they called the law. He was coming down the street at me. I had visions in my head of being laid out cold and dead or else murdered by the third degree. I said, Oh Lord, if you can, save me from that man. Don't let him make a pulp out of me. But the Lord, he was not quit. The law raised up his stick and beat the living hell out of me. Now I do not understand why God don't protect a man from police brutality. Being poor and black, I have no weapon to strike back, so who but the Lord can protect me? Langston Hughes was in the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, an anti-fascist group that went to Spain and tried to help the people resisting the early rise of the Axis. And he was a remarkable poet from the Harlem Renaissance. So, you see, who can protect us is a major narrative form, a major narrative figure. And if you look at the for holistic understanding for yourself, I admire Jordan Peterson sometimes. If you're looking for your own grasp of critiquing the world around you, you might want to look at the best foot forward speeches in the last few days of the UN ambassadors. The man from China was particularly interesting, an ancient country who's forsworn first use of nuclear weapons. I lived in Chinatown for a long time. I saw the Chinatown poor. They were nice to me. I was happier than I ever thought I could be under the circumstances that were my life. And contrary to the um, apparently popular opinion in casinos that paradise is a wrangle over who gets to monopolize Hooter indulgences, you might call them, um, who has a monopoly over hootering. There's a great deal to be said for the love that you experience helping people who are poor. For me, it would be a great day that I could help provide enough rice for the elderly of Chinatown for a month or something. But nobody has the right in a democratic world of civil rights to impose aggressively a program of confiscation of private achievements. And yet, when it comes to the disenfranchisement, very few people have a greater legacy of abuse and loss than the Chinese in America. There's a book called The Chinese Must Go from Harvard that discusses what happened here where I live in Tacoma. Violence, exclusion. These issues seemingly get raised to protect the minority poor by UW dialectical. But the index system makes you wonder. Notice the middle name Liu, as in Lou Carl. For him, the Chinese must go would be, you're damn right they do. And that's the problem in the way that the index publication project has set up the challenge of dealing with them. I lived in North Carolina for a while, and you wonder where the burden of proof is on the idea that America means well. I mean, Crabtree Creek was destroyed, and there was just a bulldozer in it last time I visited. What are they doing? Poaching the entire natural landscape and then saying, well, go ahead and try to make it configured for your welfare ideas. You know, we'll humor you. And at root of this is an ill considered and unhappy headquarters of depopulating because they say that overpopulation is the root of the problem. Many of these people are greedy and get a lot of money. Jordan Peterson carries on, oh, these climate change people want to sacrifice the living, the masses who have such hope for achievement in order to accommodate a future where they imagine they'll be kindly disposed to children who come later, future generations. And you're supposed to say, what's wrong with that, Jordan, in your mind? And they say, and then you get a little laugh inside, see why we had to do it. We had to do it because it's preeminent to save the future. So you get the idea when I say how to do it, let's talk about what they did. One of the things that they did as you know, if you cyber stalk me, I can have a monopoly over a Hooter station pretty much anytime I want to with my cyber routine. So I know where to find images of pretty girls and stuff, as anybody does. I don't live above the poverty line. There's this claim that goes around that that's what I would do if I had money. Well, maybe so. And I'm not going to put it down, but um, monopoly over binge hootering has come up as the antithesis of rectitude, despite the progenitors being the ones making the accusations, because it's a laugh. You know, if you look at the main issues that have come up in um, the UN speeches, one of them is that no to bullying. Sounds good, right? That's a great thing for the international community to take up. But then you have the question of um, if we say no to bullying, who is the bully? And when you look at the problem of people who have all the answers, they have strategic satire to engage the ideas of others. So let's for a minute imagine that we believe that each of us has every man has an animus, every woman has an animus, and we're on a parallax to become celibate androgynes again, living in eternity and bliss with Krishna. So you have a Tammy Simon look-alike with the Dalai Lama coming on to the magical lesbian within and transforming the human race by injecting the blood, as they'll put it, in the name of a fourth dimensional idea from the second Disney World of the double fantasy. Naturally, Bush would see that and say, T. Simon, let there be light. T. Simon Farasani, fair sanitation. You know, King was killed among sanitation workers, and it was correlated to Genie, to Neva Corporation's starlet's loss of virginity. So they have this Gilgamesh thing going. And the search is for, you know, the Tinkerbell once doesn't have honor. He won't fight. He's not a knight of resignation, the duty to chivalry. Matrimony is at a crossroads, King Thorol's crossroads. Matrimony is the stupid code that Nabucco um, correlated to Thursday being a day too because you wed first. So overpopulation is solved by the Christian duty of matrimony. Okay, suppose we all were to agree to that. Who's piping this from above is the beauty pageanter who sets up monopoly bench hootering and has a world of dough, and he doesn't like to share, and he presided over some depopulation measures. So where you get the idea is the people who oppose that believe in discarding women after they're no use to the binge monopoly hooter as hooters. Okay, so who takes care of them when they get old? Kick them off. Who takes care of them when? Who do they take care of? With what resources? Women are out in the boondocks being surrounded by water because of the climate change, and that's pornography's fault. It doesn't seem to me like that's necessarily true. So there are certain issues that arise around me. For example, I was born at a place called the Ruskin, which is the name of a um, school like Oxford or a branch of Oxford. And I was given the book by John Ruskin, King of the Golden River, where the Black Brothers told the old man, you have had your share of life. So what they did was they set me up as an object lesson in the satire, impinging on me. And this was a military college overseeing from the fourth dimension. Carl, Sherrill, Carell. I mean, Oliver Stone says the Beard could be a movie star. What movie star would he be? Peter O'Toole? Because he's playing Caligula. For all of the fine words of Lavrov, what do we need this chaos in the Ukraine for? There were a lot of people concerned with what Russia was saying. I'm not alone in feeling that his statement, if it's that America has to be stood up to as a bully too, is a rational claim, but it's not necessarily defense of his actions. He seemed to have established a narrative that he felt, oh, I can opportunize on the basis of this narrative. And that's what he's pursuing. So you have to be careful who speaks, who's going to protect, who's the Lord who's going to protect me from the law coming down the highway to beat my brains in, as Langston Hughes says. Gerald Horne buys it. He falls for this stuff. But the idea of the red and the green comes out when you look at the Ben Shooter Monopoly board at Carnegie Mellon. Ming-No Wen controls all kinds, has a whole puppet show of Ben Shooter Korean girls, who would be lovely to have flirtations with. And they set up the Mount Desert Island, the object lesson has you have had your share of life. And then they come in and with the token Asian queen, and she trots off with the span of Bindu dude with Rastafari shaking his Black Panther kudu kudu, who hire Rastafarianism. And they say, well, Tinkerbell could have saved John Lennon, and that justifies the AIDS attack because it promotes the black man. And Spike Lee gets the picture of the black man and burned down Sal's. But there was never any evidence that it was mechanical, pornographic, cybernetting, robo show. But there's no evidence whatsoever that I ever tried to come between a white woman and a black man, or a black woman and a white man. It's far, far from it. It brings smiles to my face. The way they went about it was through a military construction. Thou shalt not violate the sacred matrimony. Well, it wasn't really a sacred matrimony. The girl didn't tell me she was married, and it was an arranged marriage so they could study in the United States. So it was a red and green put on, in other words, from the drama club. And they ran it through a neuroplasm. I want to tell you a little about that neuroplasm. Tony Serby put it in there, who loved Pink Floyd and Roger Waters. So they knew that it was going to cause jealousy. So they had a Pink Floyd, The Wall, was the walrus background, all planned out. And they ran some tests to make sure it worked that way. And they detonated it, ripped it open to satisfy Gerald Horne that the white had been demolished. Well, that's a place called Tacit. TC is a symbol nearby. Trump acid, Turump, TACID, Trump acid. They burn this thing into the neuroplasm. And the next day, when I was a child, after going this terrible trauma, I went to the Towering Inferno. An earthquake was next door, so it was rumbling and shaking all the time, and incense around. And O.J. Simpson wears a 4-4 shirt, which is the day that King was killed. DD, it stands for. Like 444 days is 4 times 4 times 4 is 64, which is the turnaround date the symbolists use from 46. 18 is AH. DD is 44. And you have that terrible look in his eyes when he kills Nicole Brown Simpson. And this happened at the same time as Jeffrey Dahmer. And you can see from the TikTok images I saw this morning, when the woman comes out who's beautiful and gets a knife to her fixed dinner, and while you're, you know, dreaming of your tryst with her, it skewers her legs so that there's a oblique line through it as though she's been cut. And they're making this road show that there's not enough to have uh, binge hootering for the people who have a monopoly over life. And so we have to cut, you know, down to ethical Christianity, matrimony, all 6 feet off or 6 feet under is the message from Hensley's Washington. So we got the picture. Get the picture. I'm trying to get the picture across to you about what's being done by here. Another person. Question is, why weren't they just talking about it openly in the 80s? Why were they playing these Svengali games? And one of them was putting out something called Flame Over Africa, the deluge monster. And she was, of course, Croc Agrigoster was behind a lot of this, and she just sits on a mountain of money. So I don't want any of it. I'm not trying to rob her. I'm not John Schulman. I'm not Croc Agrigoster. I'm not trying to rob anybody. So Michael Friday worked with, I think that was his name. It would be typical of them to use a man named Friday because Friday's the end of the week, right? But you change the spelling to WEAK, the end of the week. He was the one who was in liquid crystals, which is what this no, tea acid, Trump acid, did to me as a child. I was seeing all of these liquid crystals. And he was with Artec, which is like Aztec human sacrifices and stuff. And if you look at Attenborough's Gandhi, Attenborough's Gandhi has a mythic moment where a man lost his son in the riots, and Gandhi says, "Find a child of the other religion and take him and adopt him and raise him and show him love." And this is a real tearjerker scene. But it's what John Rawls theorized too. John Rawls was the walrus about the closest continuum. So Ruth Ginsburg hacked that woman Carrie with the elevator. The Tacoma clinic had a woman named Ruth who was really good with everything, really good with everybody. Then she left and we were ruthless. You get the idea. The stage management from the production company of Thorl's Crossroads. Now, Roger Waters, of course, is older than me by about 15 years at least, probably, but he looks like he's greatly preserved. That he's the stud of the monopoly of King Hooters, and you see Putin with his limousine scene and stuff. These guys chemically castrated me for failure to perform as a military chauvinist, and the women were panting for them to do that to me. Nobody's ever defended me. So Kiss and Sylvester Stallone may be right that the heart of Burma is Pee Wee Herman, sitting panting in the woods, um, autoerotically facing off the devil while he tries to transform into Krishna, his higher self, the lesbian anima of his inner um, um, Beatles revelation of lust. But to me, it sounds like Hollywood's false sponsorship again. So, the wizard wonks came up with this stuff. And Hollywood has a talking box going. Talking box of Hollywood, they talk from both sides of the mountain, the mountain. Or they say, yeah, I personally do not believe they cleared this. Putin had anything to do with the murder of Susie Kennedy. I have absolutely no belief that he did that. What I think happened was that the Israeli nutters and Trumpy tunes killed Susie after raping because they said that we had it with these liberals. And yeah, it's a sort of a bombing schools routine, because schools are going to give people access to knowledge that can confront the extremism of media's control over education, because everybody's supposed to gyrate to spin magazines take on the beauty pageant puppet show. And of course, they watch me like a hawk because they have really dirty movies they made. They call it the Devil Project or something, which was to conk out Crary and tell them that safety was in a single woman's apartment, um, trying to help with rat by washing dishes. And you can see that that's the epitome of humiliation. So the truth is, it wasn't bad. I mean, some of the things that I learned reading at night aloud to the waitress I was living with in Montana stayed with me forever. So when you look at some of the questions that come up with the way that Waters managed this, I mean, he had a Moorcock thing going with and Pugh and the Art Council. Well, what if there were a gang listening, believing, and then needing some satisfaction? So they push button and demolition. And this vivifies the luminousness of Hollywood's talking box. He speaks for all sides in clearing the air for reconciliation. And of course, they used me symbolically. Frank Herbert called it soul catcher. I'm born 6 months from Adolf Hitler. 666, got it? Ha 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 ha. Very funny. Queerball, the agnostic pacifist who wouldn't fight back at Fulton School when a gang attacked him blindside, fully armed men. Um, um, his top secretly, his pacifism is evil. He's Hitler. And they proved that by Thorl's crossroads technique. So the idea that pornography is terrorism is pretty much the root of all of this. And Buckley said, if people want drugs, sell them with rat poison. In other words, give it to them, but with cost, give it to them in poison. It's terrorism, so those are the terms of endearment. Well, it seems to me that it would be a good idea to get our minds around some of this stuff because it's pretty blowhard. One of the guys that came up with this stuff, when you look at Diamond de Gaulle and this anti-Putin gang, they're just as hostile. Minion Zap is irrationally filled with hatred for the educational system and people like me. This dude had his wits about him. He was really smart. This is the basis of humanist education in some ways. Brilliant, wonderful man who did wonders for the Russian Federation when it was going the right direction. He was practical. And yet, when you see what John Lennon pulled, you see the Gorbachev's birthmark and the stripe down Lennon's shin, how I won the war, signify the fallen. It was orchestrations of what they did to the fallen and stuff. It's a media puppet show. being put on by the Herder-Benz monopoly system. As I say, I don't have anything against Herder-Benzing. I mean, if that's, but they made it more dangerous than it should be, and they're actually chasing me around with a needle, putting an empty set at two virgins. I mean, that's Thorl's crossroads writ large. I mean, why did they put a child in the Ruskin in a crib as a war college at the University of Pittsburgh? That seems not particularly brotherly, you know. An Ayn Rand prank of some kind, eugenic prank, you know. We bought the baby. That's not supposed to go on in the United States, but Michael Friday's, you know, cult made the funny bone tape. You know, if you touch a funny bone, it actually hurts. It's not funny at all. They made the funny bone tape of the carrot implant, the TV, two virgins television pornograph thing, the carbon hell flagged over Africa with Todd Clark's Andrew Swimmer and stuff from Pete Shell's office of the red and the green with Tokyo bombast and Chomsky's red and the green linguistics department stuff is implant. So WEEK, end of the week, WEAK is typical Steelers and Steelers. They steal. The Steelers steal, as we know from Shulman. And the Beatles are based on the Beetle, VW Beetle that was created by Adolf Hitler, who's Casper the Friendly Ghost. So it's a two-way street with this claim of Nazism. Vlad and Vlad are two V's working together on this project. I mean, Vladimir, the good guy, says, why isn't Israel arming us? Well, it's because their vassal America already is arming. You know. I mean, even what I say taken out of context becomes um, something that can misuse. And it's a metaphor for the idea that education can only be misused. So, you know, that's the sort of honcho that they're playing. But here's an interesting realization: the 3500 from here is pantamic for Kennedy assassination. Kennedy has three, assassination has five. Kennedy assassination. 00 is license to kill. So, you know, what they're really after are disposable liberals. And, you know, I'm not sure Peter expected a cakewalk into Donbass. I think Don and his bassist were just playing their old spin gyrations and saying, you know, we're going to have to do something dramatic to move on from COVID-19 so people don't discuss whether we really did the right thing or not, you know. But you did the right thing, Spike Woodley. You're getting Flame Over. You promoted Flame Over Africa for the coup, blackery, the provincial norm. Um, well, we won't go thinking we're better than us. We know you've changed.